The One in Vegas, Part 1, is the 23rd episode of the 5th season of Friends. This is directed by Kevin Bright. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And while it definitely is a good episode, I feel like I obviously won't talk about the next episode in any detail, but Part 2 is where all of the great moments happen. So I feel like this exists to set us up for the next part. Does it need to be a two-parter? I guess it's not too bad. It's not one of those where I don't understand why they made it 2 parts. But this one is definitely just setting the scene rather than providing anything too interesting. Maybe Chandler and Monica definitely is interesting, but the rest is all just setting up. And usually with Friends, I'll discuss each part of the narrative in turn rather than going through things chronologically. But because everything is kind of connected here, and we kind of weave in and out of them, I'm going to just go through things chronologically. And it starts off with Joey dressed as a gladiator, and then Monica tells Phoebe she saw Richard. And then she went to get something to eat with Richard, and Monica was actually quite happy because she realised she felt nothing for Richard now, which was really great, but she still doesn't want Chandler to find out because he'll just kind of freak out, which I think is pretty fair. And then we learn that tomorrow is actually Monica and Chandler's anniversary, which really seems like that's come around really quickly. And Monica's got him Vegas tickets. So they'll go to Vegas, enjoy their anniversary, and they'll get to see Joey while they're there. And Phoebe takes that as an opportunity to invite herself on the trip, because obviously she didn't get to go to London. And then she mentioned it to Ross and Rachel, and they both decide that they'll also go on the trip, but they'll fly out the Saturday after as they both have events leading up to it. And then we're on the plane, and Phoebe kind of accidentally mentions Richard and the fact that Monica saw him. And I don't know how I feel about Chandler's response. I don't think Chandler had any right to be upset with Monica for just bumping into Richard. But I think he did have a right to be upset that she kept it a secret from him. I think that was pretty reasonable. We're then back in the apartment briefly, and Rachel is walking around naked. This is because of something that Phoebe said. And Ross just so happens to be working by his window. He glances up. He sees Rachel naked. I guess the lesson there is that if you're going to walk around naked, maybe make sure people can't see in your window, unless you don't mind them seeing, of course. And Ross thinks that Rachel is doing this intentionally, and he goes over and tries to lay some ground rules for them being intimate. And of course, Rachel has no idea what he's going on about. It was an awkward moment, but I thought it was pretty funny. We're then in Vegas, and Monica and Chandler see Joey, and Phoebe sees Joey dressed as the gladiator. And Joey has to confess the film lost its funding, it ran out of money. And I like the fact that he didn't try and keep up pretenses too much. I think it would have been quite difficult, but it was a little bit funny that he initially did try to pretend that he was in a gladiator movie. And I like the fact that he admitted things pretty quickly. There's no shame in the film losing funding. It's not something he could have helped. And then we have a moment that I don't like, because Chandler and Monica are arguing about Richard, and Chandler basically bans Monica from ever seeing Richard again. And I don't think that that's acceptable. After all, Monica could randomly bump into him, and what is she supposed to say? Oh, sorry, my boyfriend won't let me see you. It's not a good look for Chandler. I understand him being annoyed, but at the same time, he can't really control that. We then spend a bit of time on the plane, and I didn't really like this part of the episode. I don't hate it necessarily, I just don't find it interesting. Ross and Rachel basically spend the entire time winding each other up, trying to embarrass each other. It's fine. I don't mind it. I feel like it's slightly setting us up for the next episode, but if this didn't exist, I don't think it would make a difference. Joey then finds his identical hand twin, which is probably one of the most, in fact, I'd say it's the most iconic moment from this particular episode. And Joey was excited and enthusiastic about it, and it's adorable to see. And then we end with Phoebe talking with Chandler. Phoebe telling Chandler that Monica felt nothing for Richard and that he shouldn't be scared of anything. And Chandler realizes he needs to go and talk to Monica. And I don't know how I feel about what Chandler does at the end of this episode. I know what happens next, but I feel like we're left on this episode on an unpleasant note, and it would leave me really concerned over the course of however long, the week or whatever, until the next episode, because he sees Monica gambling, she hugs somebody, she's high-fiving people, she's really happy and having a great time, and Chandler just kind of looks at her, smiles, she doesn't see him, and then he walks away. And it's quite suspenseful. Why has he done that? Where is he going? I know the answer to those questions because I've seen the next episode, but to end this episode that way, it's kind of bitter. It's not a positive ending. It's a very ambiguous ending, and maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Definitely quite suspenseful. Is the one in Vegas Part 1 a good episode? Sure. Does it need to be a two-parter? I guess it's fine as a two-parter. As I said, pretty much the bulk of this episode is just setting us up for what's to come. They very easily could have condensed a lot of this. I feel like the next episode needed a little bit extra, so I don't mind this being a two-parter, but definitely I feel like the bits with Ross and Rachel were maybe not that interesting on the plane, and the hand twin thing, as great as it is, maybe isn't the most exciting thing. So I don't mind it being a two-parter, but had it only been a standalone, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. But nevertheless, that being said, the one in Vegas Part 1 is still a pretty decent episode, and I don't think it's an episode I would ever skip. If I'm binge watching this season, I think I'd be quite happy to watch it, which basically tells me that actually I think it's pretty good. I don't mind it being a two-parter. The one in Vegas Part 2 definitely is not a bad episode of Friends.